Welcome back, guys, to another Python tutorial. Today we're going to be going over functions. Okay, so let's jump right into the code editor. I'm going to be using PyCharm. Okay, so functions are basically how you run actions in programming. They simplify your code and they reduce a lot of repetition throughout your code. There are three main parts of a function, and I'm going to show you that in a second. So we're going to go into Python. We're going to make a new file and call it function. Okay, so technically four main parts of a function. First, the def keyword, which is pretty much how you create or define a function. There is the name of the function, so that you can call it later. The parentheses, whatever goes inside the parentheses are actually the parameters for the function. A function with parentheses with nothing inside of them means that there are no parameters, and it's just a function that doesn't take anything but just outputs something. And then the fourth and final thing is just the action of the function. So if we run our code, we'll see. Oops. Actually, I didn't do that right. Function. Okay, I got functions. Oh, did I spell it wrong again? Function.py. Yeah. Okay, there it is. And as you can see, nothing actually outputted because we never actually called the function. So the way we call functions in Python is we first call the function's name, and we use parentheses just like we did up here when we were defining it. And that essentially just means putting parentheses pretty much tells Python that you're calling a function. So we're going to go to terminal, and you can see it ran the function and gave us the correct output. Okay, so let's talk about functions with parameters. So I'm going to create a variable called var with a value of 25, and I'm going to make a function called square root, where it takes in a number n and runs the following function. Do this. Okay. So basically, this is a function with a parameter, as you can see inside. Parameters can have whatever name you want, and parameters are just telling what's it called, Python, that it's inputting a variable. It's asking for an input of a variable. So basically, you're inputting something for the value n, and it uses that value n somewhere in the function. So when you're calling it, we need to place a variable or a value of some sort inside the function in order for it to be called correctly. If we don't do it, you'll see an error will be called. It's saying it's missing one positional argument n, meaning that it's missing a value, an argument inside to go inside the function. Sorry. So basically, how this function works is I have the variable n that we asked for at the beginning, and I'm changing the value of it to n to raise to the half power. We haven't seen this operator yet, so I'm going to explain it to you what it is. When you put two multiplication signs together, that turns into an exponent. So the number after it is what value you raise it to. So if I change it to 2, I'm essentially saying n should be raised to the second power and store that value as the new value of n. And if we wanted to do roots, like square roots or cube roots, what we do is invert it. Take the reciprocal, and it would, because square roots are just the reciprocal of exponents. So just like if I wanted to square a number, I would just raise it to the second power. If I wanted to square root a number, I would raise it to the half power. Same thing goes with cube and cube root. Cubes is third power, cube root is 1/3 power, and so on, so on. So yes, I square rooted the number, and I'm going to print that new value of n. So let's see what happens when we put in var. We see we get 5, and it actually works perfectly. Okay, let's try something else that's going to be useful for functions. We're going to make a function that has a parameter of n, a number. We're going to create a new number, a new variable called num, and set that equal to n%2. And I'll explain to you what that is in a second. And we're going to make it if num is equal to or greater than 1, return true. Else num, actually I'm going to do this next. If num is equal to 1, else return true, false. Okay, so that was probably a lot to take in for this function, and there are a lot of new concepts inside of here. So one thing you should know when creating functions is that, as I said, when you make a parameter, you're pretty much making a variable, and that variable is only a temporary variable that only exists inside that function. Same thing goes for variables that you create within the function, like this num variable. So num and n are temporary variables that only exist inside the function, otherwise known as scope. So in computer programming, when a variable is only temporary or exists only in certain places, that place is called a scope. So n and num only exist within the scope of the even function. Okay, so next thing I'm going to talk about is the percent sign. So the percent sign essentially just divides a number by whatever the following number and gives us the remainder. So whatever number we get for n, we're saying that we should divide it by 2, and num is going to be equal to the remainder of that number. So when we put in var, we're going to do 25 divided by 2, which is 12 remainder 1, so num will be equal to 1. We're going to talk about if and else statements in another video, but the basic understanding of it is you're saying if the following statement is true, then run this. Otherwise, run this. That's essentially what that means right there. So I'm saying if num is equal to 1, return false. Otherwise, return true. Now, return statements are used for functions only, so you'll never see them outside of functions. And essentially what you're saying is you're giving the function an action, and then you're telling it to return something. So with that return function, or with that return statement, we can actually set variables equal to functions like now. So if I say make a variable called is it even, and say call the even function, and I'm putting var inside of it, whatever value, so let me just explain what's going to happen. So 25 is going to be input into this function. We get 25 is going to be divided by 2, and the remainder is going to be equal to num. And if that num is equal to 1, then is it even is going to be equal to false. If it's not equal to 1, then it's going to be equal to true. It's going to have a value of true. And since 25 divided by 2 gives us a remainder of 1, it's going to have a value of false. So let's just print that out. And you'll see we got false, just as expected. We can even print the function itself without even having to create a new variable or create a variable. So it also gave us false. One thing you'll notice though is that if we try to print out the function square root, it will give us none in return because it doesn't have any return statement. So it defaults, if there's no return statement inside a function, it defaults to none. So whatever value you're expecting without a return, if you're expecting a value and you're getting none, that just means you don't have a return statement for that function. And that is pretty much everything you need to know in terms of functions for Python. Hopefully that was a short and good video to help you understand it and help you get better at Python. Leave a comment if you have any questions. Please let me know what I could have done better. Leave a like and subscribe. Thank you.